So you've sent us some really fascinating stuff about how new drugs actually get developed and make their way to patients. And you seem particularly interested in phase 3 clinical trials.
Ah, yes.
So let's jump right in. When we talk about these huge phase 3 trials,
Mm.
what are we really trying to figure out,
Mm.
and why are they so crucial in this whole process of drug development?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. All the stuff that you sent paints a really clear picture, I think, of just how long and complicated this whole journey is. And phase three is definitely, you can't get around it. It's like a make or break moment for these drug candidates that have shown some promise.
Right.
What we really want to do in this deep dive is break down the core parts of what phase three is all about. And there are three big things. One, showing that the drug really does work in a much bigger group of people.
Right.
Two, understanding how it works in all sorts of different patients, not just one specific type.
Got it.
And three, we need to look at the safety of the drug over a longer period of time.
Makes sense.
If you really want to grasp how much evidence is needed before a new treatment can actually be given to patients, you got to understand these three things.
Okay, so let's dive into that first when you mentioned large-scale efficacy.
Right.
What does that actually mean in the context of a phase 3 trial? And how does it build on what we've already learned in those earlier phases?
So you've got your phase one, where it's all about safety first and foremost. Then you move to phase two, where you're starting to get those early hints about whether the drug might actually work.
Yeah.
But phase three is where things get really serious. We're talking way more participants.
Okay.
The main goal is no longer just hints. We need to know for sure, does this drug really work when you give it to a wider range of people?
Mm.
Phase two might give you a glimmer of hope, but phase three has to provide the proof. It's got to show how well the drug performs in a setting that's as close as possible to how it'll actually be used in the real world.
Yeah. So it sounds like if the early phases are kind of like laying the foundation and making sure you've got something solid to build on, phase 3 is when you find out if the building can withstand a hurricane.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. This is the trial that everyone is watching. The researchers, the regulators, even the doctors and patients who might one day use this drug. Everyone needs to be convinced that this treatment is the real deal.
So you're putting it to the ultimate test.
Exactly. And a huge part of that is making sure the people in the trial are a good representation of the real world.
Right, the diverse patient population idea. Why is that so important in phase 3?
Yeah, you sent some stuff about that.
Well, it seems pretty obvious to me. You want to know if a drug is going to work for more than just a small group of people, right? If your trial only includes, say, men of a certain age and ethnicity, how can you be sure it'll be effective or even safe for women or for people from different backgrounds?
That's exactly it. When you include a wide range of people in your phase 3 trial, you're considering all sorts of things like their age, their sex, their ethnicity, even any other health conditions they might have. This is absolutely vital. It lets us see if the drug works the same way across the board.
Right, because there could be differences.
Absolutely. You might find that the treatment works wonders for one group, but is less effective or causes different side effects in another. If you don't have that diversity in your trial, you could end up with a drug that gets approved but doesn't work for everyone.
Or even worse, it's dangerous for some people.
Exactly. That's a real concern. Regulatory bodies like the FDA are getting more and more strict about this. They want to see trials that are truly representative of the people who will be using the drug. They need that assurance that the evidence is solid.
It reminds me of all the talk about personalized medicine.
Right.
I mean, we're not quite there yet where every treatment is tailored to your specific genes and all that. But this idea of having diverse phase 3 trials seems like it's moving us in the right direction. The more we understand how different groups of people respond to a drug, the better we can figure out who's likely to benefit the most.
Exactly. These trials give us so much valuable information. We may not be able to predict how each individual will react, but when you have data from a diverse population, you can make more informed decisions about treatment options for different groups of patients.
And that leads to better care.
It helps us refine our understanding of who the drug is really for and where those potential risks might be hiding.
So it's not just about efficacy, it's also about safety. And that's another big focus of phase 3 trials,
Yeah.
right? Especially long-term safety.
Absolutely. Phase 3 trials are usually much larger than the earlier phases, and people are on the drug for a longer period of time. This gives us a much clearer picture of its safety over the long haul. You know those side effects that might not show up right away? The ones that only emerge after months or even years of taking the drug? Those are the ones we're really looking for in these extended studies.
And that's important because
It's crucial because once a drug is approved, people might be taking it for a very long time, and we need to be absolutely sure that we understand any potential long-term effects.
Right. It's not just about whether it works in the short term. It's about making sure it's safe for patients over the long haul.
Exactly.
So when you're running these big long-term studies, what are you actually measuring? What are the specific things you're trying to assess?
Phase 3 trials always have very clear objectives. Usually, these revolve around what we call endpoints. You've got your primary endpoint, that's the main result the study is designed to measure.
Okay.
It's the thing that tells you if the drug really makes a difference for patients clinically.
So what kind of things are we talking about?
Well, it could be something like an increase in survival rates, a decrease in how severe the disease symptoms are, or even a direct measurement of a biomarker that's important for that particular disease.
Right, something you can actually quantify.
Exactly. Your source, Season 5 clinical trials, Phase 3, and regulatory approval, really hits the nail on the head here. These endpoints have to be specific, and you have to be able to measure them. It's not just about patients saying, I feel a bit better.
Right, you need hard data. And speaking of data, that source also mentioned something about statistical hypotheses. How do those come into play in deciding whether a trial has been successful or not?
That's a great question. So the statistical hypothesis is basically the framework that researchers use to analyze all that data they collect and figure out what it all means. In a lot of phase 3 trials, the main goal is to show that this new treatment is actually better than whatever's already out there. This could be a placebo, a sugar pill basically, or it could be the current standard of care, the best treatment available right now.
Okay, so you're comparing the new drug to something else.
Exactly, and this is what we call a superiority hypothesis. The researchers are looking for enough evidence to say, okay, we're pretty darn sure that this new drug is better than the control. But sometimes the goal is different. Sometimes the goal is to show that the new treatment is at least as good as the existing one.
And why would that be the goal?
Well, maybe the new drug has fewer side effects. Or maybe it's easier to take, like a pill instead of an injection. So in those cases, you're not necessarily looking to be better, you just want to show that you're not worse.
I see.
And that's what we call a non-inferiority hypothesis.
Interesting. So there are different ways to look at the data depending on what you're trying to achieve with the new treatment.
Exactly. It all comes down to what's best for the patient in the end.
And to be confident in the results of these trials, everything has to be done in a very specific way.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Every single detail of a phase 3 trial is carefully planned out and documented in a protocol. This includes things like who's eligible to participate, how the treatment is given, how the data is collected, even how it's analyzed. Everything is standardized.
And why is that so important?
Because it minimizes bias and it ensures that the results are reliable. By following the same procedures across the board, researchers can be more confident that any effects they see are truly due to the drug itself and not some other variable that wasn't controlled for.
Right. It's all about making sure the data is clean.
Exactly. You need that rigorous structure to be able to draw meaningful conclusions, especially when you're dealing with so many participants.
Speaking of which, you know that Season 5 source we talked about earlier, it mentioned just how huge some of these phase 3 trials can be. Can you give us a sense of the scale?
Oh, yeah. Some of these trials enroll hundreds, even thousands of participants. And these participants are often spread out across multiple research centers, sometimes even in different countries. This huge scale is often necessary because sometimes the difference between the new drug and the existing one isn't that big. So to be absolutely sure that the new drug is actually better, you need a lot of data. You need a lot of people in your study. And while we're not talking about specific landmark studies for this deep dive, I'll just say these large, well-designed phase 3 trials, the ones that show positive results, they often end up changing the way doctors practice medicine.
That makes sense.
They can lead to real breakthroughs in how we treat diseases.
Impacting so many lives.
Exactly. And it's important to remember where all of this fits in the grand scheme of things. As your source, drug development, from discovery to market, explains, phase 3 comes after years of preclinical research and those earlier phase 1 and 2 trials. It's the final test, the last hurdle to clear.
It's a culmination of so much work.
And if the results are positive, that's usually what the FDA needs to give the green light and make the drug available to patients.
So phase 3 is really the deciding factor.
It's the ultimate proof that a new treatment is both effective and safe enough for everyone to use.
Well, this has been incredibly helpful in understanding what phase 3 trials are all about.
My pleasure.
So just to recap for our listener, these trials are big. They involve a lot of people from diverse backgrounds, and they focus on confirming that the drug really works and that it's safe in the long run.
Right.
They have very clear goals, and they rely on rigorous statistical methods to analyze the data. And at the end of the day, if a drug makes it through phase 3 successfully, that's usually what paves the way for it to be approved and made available to patients.
Couldn't have said it better myself. If you want to understand how modern medicine works, how we know that the treatments we use are actually effective and safe, then you need to understand phase 3 trials.
Absolutely. And with that in mind, here's something for you to think about, listener. We've talked about how complex these trials are, how much effort goes into making sure they include people from all walks of life. So the question is this: what do you think are the biggest challenges in making sure that the results of these trials are not only scientifically sound, but also a true reflection of how well the drug will work and how safe it will be for everyone who needs it?
That's something to ponder, for sure.
It's a question that really gets to the heart of what clinical research is all about, constantly striving to improve and make sure that everyone benefits from the latest advances in medicine. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you then.